Hi, I'm Mary Kenlock, and today we're going to do fuchsia flowers, and I'm going to do a hanging basket of them. First thing we're going to do is start with a sheet of leaves. There are a double leaf and single tiny leaves. Now, they the hole in the center of the double leaf doesn't really work. And I'll show you how I put them together when we get to that point. If I had made them thicker for the hole, they wouldn't be as good a leaf. So I kind of left them the way they were when I first got the sample. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm taking a 1/2 inch flat brush and I petaled out some Seminole green Ceramcoat paint. This is my favorite green. And I dip my brush in a little bit of water, and then I paint from one end of the sheet to the other until they're all painted. Okay, then I'm going to flip over the sheet and paint the other side. A lot of the paint seeps under, so there's not a lot to paint. The one thing you need to do is now clamp the sheet and make sure that some of these pieces that are maybe touching the border are straight. This is the fun part where you can get your fingers in paint. Now, some of them are still touching, but I'm going to go ahead and hang this to dry. If I pull the leaves out of the sheet when it's just dry, then they won't be stuck to the edge of the border of the open area between the leaves. If I leave them overnight, they probably will stick and be very difficult to remove. Now the flowers, I'm going to paint the same way, only I'm not going to do that on this tape. But what I've done is I cut the sheet. You have a sheet like this, and it has two different types of petals. I'm going to cut it right on my name here, and I'm going to paint these, which are the back petals of the flower, red, and these purple. So you can see when you're done making the flower, it will, and how they hang down. Okay, so there's your two colors of flowers. I mean, of the for the flower. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting leaves on wire. After my leaves have all dried. One thing that you can do while you're waiting for things to dry is puddle out some Eileen's tacky glue, and this looks too bright. That may be better. Take some of your 30 gauge wire, and you can use small little pieces. Dip the tip of the wire in just the white glue, like that. If you've seen one of my other videos, it's so that when you push the wire into the paper and push it up to the top, you don't push it all the way off the top. It gives you something a stopper. Okay, so I did a whole bunch of those. And now the leaves. Don't use Zap-A-Gap for this entire plant. If you have to use Zap-A-Gap, be sure to go back over the areas with just white glue. And I'll show you why in a second. Okay, I have a whole bunch of leaves and no small ones here. That happens. Okay, here's a couple of small ones. Sometimes it's not a good idea to mix them up, and I tend to clean up the workshop and I mix them up, and then I'm sorry. Okay, so I put, with white glue only, 2 tiny leaves at the tip. Let me see if, I don't know if I can make this light. There we go. So that you can see. Okay, there's 2 tiny leaves at the very tip, and then the double leaves, I told you can try pushing the wire through that hole, but it's frustrating because they break. So what I do is, and some of them work, some of them don't, some of them do, but what I usually do is kind of give them a pinch like that, and then just dip the bottom part in the white glue and set it on the leaf. Okay, and then next, small leaf. When I looked at a fuchsia plant, they had tiny leaves, bigger leaves, kind of between each other. So that's why I did the 2 different sizes of leaves. Now, you see what I'm doing? I'm kind of bending those double leaves, dipping them in white glue only, and just setting them on the wire. Okay, then I find some more small ones, and just keep going with that. You can also pull one of these bigger leaves off and put it with a smaller leaf, just to have some variation there. See what I've done? Okay, now when you get a nice pile of leaves on your wires, like this, and I've got my hanging pot. This is a Braxton Payne pot, and I hope that that chain is going to cooperate for me. When I first started making flowers, I tried every kind of clay to put in the pot. The green floral clay stayed kind of wet, and I had bad luck with that. The air dry clays cracked, and sometimes flowers fell out of the pots. They also the air dry clays can't really dry when they're down in a pot, and they tend to soak through your terracotta pots and make them all stained. So anyway, I found Sculpey. What I do is I just put some Sculpey in the pot, um, and then I put white glue on the top of it, and with a drop of water, and I'm going to do that in just a second. But first I want to get these leaves ready to go in to the pot. I'm going to cut them all off. So I just have a tiny piece of the wire to go in, push into the pot. Now all these leaves were attached with white glue only. Then I went back after they were all dry and painted over the wire where all those connections are. Otherwise, you will see shiny little globs, and that really distracts from your plant. So you paint over anything that is shiny glue. Okay, now the reason that you did not use any Zap-A-Gap on this was because, like I've told you before, white glue Zap-A-Gap is wonderful when you have to do it, but it makes a brittle bond so that when you do this to shape your leaves, they would pop off. So at this point you can tweak your leaves, give them a little, do all kinds of little twisty things like that. The more twisty, the better, because plants are not flat, and they just have a more realistic look. Okay, so after I have kind of twisted all of them, I will start putting them in the pot. It's hard to tell how many of these you're going to need for a pot. And once I put the glue on the top of the Sculpey, you have got to get everything planted. Otherwise, you'll have to poke holes into the dirt because it's going to be hardened. Okay, now for dirt on my plants, I always use model railroad dirt because in Florida we have a lot of problems with mold and fungus and fuzzy things that will grow. Even if I don't use distilled water in my matte medium, fuzzy things will start to grow. So what I do is I'm going to put some white glue on the pot on top of the clay. Now I have a little disposable paintbrush that's in water, and I dip a little bit of water into that glue and spread it around. If you just use glue and not the water, for some reason, the dirt will be shiny. And it just dries, you know, kind of ick. Okay, then I'm going to take my pot off of my little double stick thing here, and I keep a jar of model railroad dirt. Okay. What I did years ago with this was I bought a whole lot of different colors and mixed them together. Now I have a huge container, because dirt is not all the same color when you go out and dig in your yard. At least not here it isn't. But anyway, so here's my pot, and I'm gonna start putting my leaves in. That one had a long stem, so I'm going to put it towards the middle. Okay. So I'm going to just keep putting these leaves in. Nice day in Florida where you can hear the birds. The birds are singing. If you notice, I'm dipping the end of the leaf in the wire in the white glue. Gives it a little extra hold there. And then just keep going around. If you notice, what I did when I was putting these leaves on wires was I varied the length of them, so that some are short, some are long, so that when you're putting them in the pot, you'll have different lengths. And then when you get them in the pot, you can bend them. Okay, just a few more, and then we're going to start making the flowers. Okay, now you'll let that dry, and if you're not happy with how it's hanging, you can bend your wires and play around with it, but it's better to do it when it's dry. Okay, so I'm going to put that one aside. Now the flowers. Okay, here's the two that are kind of three hearts together that I painted purple, and the back petals that are like a cross, they are red. Okay, so then I'm going to use one of my little wires that I tipped with the white glue, and I'm going to push the wire into the center hole of that, and see how it doesn't come off now. Okay, now I'm going to do 2 of these. So I'm going to push the wire in again. And this time I'm going to take a little bit of white glue and just touch a little bit of it underneath the flower. When I push this up, I'm going to try to make sure that the petals alternate so that they're there. Okay, so the next step is the back petals. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Now, I know in my other videos you've seen me use gel medium a lot, and what I do is I mix it in a small container, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix one right now in the green to show you how I mix it. Let's see if take a spoonful of this gel. Now you see how thick it is? For some things you want it thick, and for other things you want it to be a little looser. So it's one of those things that you just have to kind of play around with a little bit. And I don't measure paint or measure this. This is like one of those cake recipes where it's, okay, just a little dab here. So you see I just put a little dab of green paint in there. And I keep a little bottle of distilled water on my table. And I'm going to just put a few drops, not a whole lot. The more water you put in, the looser it'll be, and when you use it, it will shrink even more. Okay? But it's a little too thick to work with a paintbrush. Okay, so I'm going to stir it up. And this is what we're going to use for the little bead on the bottom of the flower. Okay. Now, here's some that I've mixed with the red, and I'm going to take a small paintbrush. Sometimes I like to use one that's kind of a long, this is a 5-0 with fairly long bristles, not real long, it's just that long. And I will dip my brush into this mixture of gel medium with red paint and lay it on the bottom of the flower. I'm making the trumpet part of the flower. Okay. Now, hopefully you can see that. And then I'm going to let that dry. And we'll do a bud with the green. As you can see on the bottom of the flower, you know, when they hang upside down like this, they can kind of, try to get that light so you can see it. They have this little bead here of green. So what I do is, to make the buds, I've put tip the wire with just a little bit of the red matte medium. Now for that little bead, I can take my green and just kind of lay it on, and you've got to have a light touch, okay? Now that one I went a little bit too high and a little bit too fat with, but chances are it'll shrink a little bit. I make a bunch of buds. Some may be rejects. Okay, and so when I'm done with the flower, with, you're letting this dry, I'm going to do, I don't have one here to show you the stamens. The stamens that I put in are red stiffened embroidery floss. The embroidery floss is cotton, and so I use fabric stiffener to stiffen long pieces of the embroidery floss. You can use white glue to stiffen it, but I found that the pieces stick together more when I used white glue. So that's why I started using fabric stiffener. Now, this is a step that you can, if you want, use the Zap-A-Gap, but it does work just the same, white glue, and then set the little stamen in place. But if you find they're bending over, and sometimes that means they're too long for the white glue, but the white glue Zap-A-Gap method, they will bond instantly. And that's okay. That's a place where they're not going to be bending. Then if you look at the very tips of the flower, I have touched with a toothpick red right on the very tips. I don't know what I'd do if they quit making gel medium, because I use it for almost everything. But it really brings to life this little flower. I did the same with the gladiolas. Touching the stamens with a little dot of that gel medium just really brings them to life. Okay, now as you can see here, I have a whole bunch of flowers that I've made, and I'm ready to put them on my plant. Here's this would be a whole lot of time of just nothing, so I'm going to tell you how I'm going to do that. I'm going to cut each flower off short. Then I am going to dip that end in white glue and Zap-A-Gap and place it right by a leaf. Now, fuchsia flowers grow in pairs, so where you put one, you need to put another one. Okay? This part gets a little tedious because you have to use the white glue and the Zap-A-Gap, otherwise you'll never get them to stay. Once you do that, let it dry, then go back over each one of those connections with your toothpick of just white glue. and then touch, touch, touch each one of those connections. If you don't, the flowers, can fall off. And that's really aggravating to me when that happens. Okay, so after you paint, you've touched every connection with the white glue, paint over each of those connections so that when you hold it up to the light, you won't see shiny, gluey connections. You'll just see green. Okay, and I think that's about it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me on my Facebook group, Making Doll's House Flowers in All Scales, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.